It seems small, but the amount of opportunities of education that they triggered from just putting the Chinese before the matcha on their menu is enormous.
Huh?
Yeah, they tell me how it's so funny. People come to the counter and say, "Can I order a Chinese matcha?" And then, undoubtedly, that gives a lot of time to ruminate on why.
Yeah.
Why do you put Chinese matcha? Why do you source a Chinese matcha? Why do you serve it? And what's the story behind it?
I Am Consciously Curious, a podcast for those that are searching for meaning and fulfillment in their lives. My name is Victor Chan, and I'm on a mission to find out why people do what they do. I've interviewed white-collar to blue-collar, entrepreneurs to passion projects, and life is just too short to not produce meaningful work. Thanks for tuning in. Hello, everyone. We're live. It's May 6th. I say that because I'm so behind on episodes. I still have like 8 or 9 episodes. If you didn't know, I do wedding photography on the side. But that being said, I'm trying to slow down in that because where we're currently at, Chicago EMT Training, is currently picked up a lot of steam in the sense of this summer we're expecting 175 students.
Oh, wow.
Where we normally expect 125. And I undercharge for wedding photography. And because I don't feel like I'm good enough to charge what the average photographers are charging, $5,500, $6,000 for a wedding. I don't charge that much. So you're getting a bargain if you get me. But that being said, I also don't feel like I want to spend that amount of time doing that, despite knowing that it's an honor and a privilege to capture someone's biggest day. You're spending 12 hours with them, if not more, and then there's months of editing on those photos. So it's got to be someone close to me at this point for me to continue doing that. So then now it's more focusing on meaningful conversations, and the side project that I was working on, as you alluded to, is trying to help capture meaningful dialogue between you and your loved one. So as you said to my dad, I got to build a portfolio. I probably got to start with my own parents or my siblings and my friends. But it could be with a parent, amongst parents, grandparents. Like the idea came from wanting to capture conversations from those that are on their deathbed. How many times have you heard people calling someone's voicemail just to hear their voice, one last time? And to have this equipment to capture it, not just on audio, but on video, I think could mean a lot. And it's actually something that we did, my wife and I did at our wedding, is one of our videographers converted our bridal suite into a podcast space. And we had 45 minutes worth of wedding guests sharing wisdom and fond memories of our time
that's
together.
Incredible. And
it's like, I want to do that for other people. I don't monetize this podcast. This is completely still a passion project. And selfishly, I gain a deep appreciation for typically Chicagoans. I would say 98, 99% are Chicagoans. Some are passing through Chicago. And it is my way or how I choose to participate in the fabric of our awesome city. And selfishly, like I said, the next time I get to participate in Volition or a restaurant or ceramics, we made kokedama plants with the guy, his handle is Uncommon Plant Guy. I don't know, it's just like it makes life that much more rich and interesting.
Absolutely.
When you know, and this is what you're doing with Volition, when you know the backstory of the makers and everything, all the hardships that they had to go through to get to where we are today. This newfound appreciation. And so if we can now from the macro come down to the micro, You've had great episodes previously on End Process with the Perilla crew, Keys to the Shop, as well as Chewing with Monica Eng. And you do a great job of sharing the stories on your website as well. So we can spend as little or as much on your background. It is an interesting background, this transition, another pandemic success story. Transition from this life of being an international tax manager for KPMG, and then making the move, like realizing that, no one is putting out great tea and sharing the actual stories of these tea farmers. And there's this opportunity to do it maybe for yourself, especially coming from a place not of expertise. Like you don't have an expertise in tea, but you quickly grew that expertise. And so I'm eager to hear all of that. I'm going to let you take the reins, and we can just start easy and then start with, how has 2025 been going for you? I'm sure you're in constant touch with the farmers in China. Like is harvest season over at this time? Is the spring harvest over? Like how is everything going for you for 2025?
Yeah, 2025, we are only, 4 months in, so much to talk about. I gave birth to a beautiful boy at the end of last year. So much of beginning of 2025 is in and out of maternity leave, having a lot of time to reflect on this new challenge of work-life balance. What my prospect should look like, how much time I want to spend at home, and versus how much time that I really wanted to dedicate to Volition to continue to grow.
Yeah.
Coupled with tariffs. So that's very interesting that it comes just before, very unfortunately, the spring harvest of much of our teas. Right now, most of our teas have actually completed production. There are a couple of teas that are during the later time, but most of them have already been produced. Volition, what we do is to have forward contracts in place with farmers that we work every year. So they already know that we will be waiting for them at the end of each harvest, purchasing teas. We actually already purchased all of the 2025 teas that may or may not have already been produced. And for the ones that are already produced, they're actually just sitting in their warehouse right now as we kind of pause on
Navigate
shipping.
The tariffs.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Trying to wait out. Every day. This is where my prior life really comes into play in terms of being international tax manager. Kind of up my alley. I checking on the news every day. One thing that we recently pushed out a newsletter to all of our wholesale partners. Volition serves over 60 different restaurants, bakeries in and out of Chicagoland area. So naturally, all of them have the same question. Are you going to have a supply issue, and are you increasing the price? So we sent out a communication saying that actually back at the end of 2024, when the election results came out, the entire campaign, Trump has been talking about imposing tariffs and really detrimental tariffs. And obviously, China is on the chopping block in that discussion. So what happened was, after the election result came out, we actually did a backup order. We purchased all of the inventory that is still remaining in each of our farmers that we work regularly. So we actually have abundance of supply for all of our wholesale partners and retail customers leading up to whenever we finish riding this wave. One thing that's different is Chinese matcha. That's something that I didn't anticipate, is the enormous Japanese matcha shortage, which really pushed us to the front center in terms of having a steady supply. So a lot of coffee shops, a lot of bakeries have come to us looking for that steady supply, because matcha has really become one of the staple items that you must have on a coffee shop menu. People really go after it. So that's all kind of talking about 2025. I initially planned to have 2 months of maternity leave so that I can really care for the newborn and understanding the new dynamics, because I also have a 5-year-old, 2 boys, boy mom for life, to understand, what emotional needs my toddler has for me, so that I can, kind of change my schedule to meet that while meeting the physical needs of my newborn. But my newborn's, to everybody's surprise, is sleeping through the night since 2 months old. So I actually had a lot of time in my hands.
Is that due to like some parents stick to a strict schedule, or are you more free flowing?
Pure luck. Pure luck.
I'll take it.
I would love to share secrets, but there's no secrets. My toddler had colic. He actually screamed so much the first days of his life that he lost his voice on day 10 of him being on this earth. So very different with my newborn, who is just he's in daycare now. His daycare teacher literally called him Mr. Chill because he's just really chill. He eats, he plays, he sleeps.
Wow.
So it's been really wonderful. We're very lucky to have that. So I actually serendipitously had a lot of time to think about where to grow Volition. We have more goals for this year to get into more stores, to get into more cafes and bakeries so that people can enjoy Volition on the go. But also into more grocery stores. We're in Whole Foods, we're in Agora, hoping to get into more places to increase accessibility.
Beautiful. That's amazing. What a ride. What a roller coaster. And I'm guessing you wouldn't have it any other way at this point.
That's an interesting thing to hear.
The best path is the one you chose. And you had a lot of agency and choice, volition in this,
absolutely.
Right?
We talked about how my prior life played a role into building Volition and where Volition is today. I'd like to think that it actually goes even farther back. So a little bit on my background, I was born on an island called Saipan. It's where my parents decided to immigrate to. And then after, they're both Chinese, and after a while living there, they realized that it's not all glorious and beautiful, chill island life that they pictured. On an island such as Saipan, you have a lot of very close-knit communities, and it's quite difficult for ones who don't speak the language to really fit in.
Can you relate it to another island, like a commonly known island, like Hawaii or
Guam?
Like Guam? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Very close to Guam. Well, actually, not really. But they're all U.S. territories, with the exception of Hawaii.
But culture-wise, okay.
Yeah, they definitely have more Chinese on the island, but still a lot of Japanese, a lot of natives.
Do you have memories of it?
Absolutely no. No, zero memory. I was too young when they decided to move back to China. So that's something that's very different than your traditional U.S. immigrants. So they decided to move back to China. I've actually never lived anywhere more than 5 years my whole life, besides Chicago, where my partner trapped me down. So with that, growing up, they have their own business. So I rarely get to see them. I kind of grew up with babysitters or various distant relatives.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that because of that unfortunate distance away from my parents, I actually have a lot of agency that they instilled in me growing up, where I feel a sense of empowerment from very early on, that I get to decide where I want to be. When I decided that I really didn't like my life in Shanghai with my extended family, I told my parents, and they moved me back to Xinjiang, which is northwest of China, closer to their work.
So you weren't living with them?
No.
Because they were traveling so much? You were living with, aunts and uncles?
What would it be? My grandparents' siblings.
Oh, wow. Yeah, kind of pretty extended.
Yeah. And then with that, I moved back to Xinjiang, and then for a period of time, I wanted to be closer to them. They work in Kazakhstan, so I lived in Kazakhstan with them for a bit. And then during this entire time, when I'm closer to them, I don't feel good about it because they're both alphas in the family and they own the same business, so they take business back home, making it really difficult. There are perks where we live a very, very comfortable life. I have a lot more than my peers do, but psychologically, emotionally, there's a big gap.
Well, how is it these days?
They're divorced.
Oh my
much
goodness! So they're happier. Are they still in business?
Relatively speaking, I guess my dad is still working. My mom is retired. She spent half time in China, half time with us. I actually forced them to get a divorce because a lot of traditional Asian families, parents stay for their children, and I had to really convince them that it is for my best benefit that you get a divorce.
How long did that take? That convincing?
Years. Finally happened in the end of my high school time. But yeah, it was during the end of middle school in China that I really reached a breaking point.
Oh, wow.
With adolescence. So I told my parents that I have a U.S. passport. I kind of want to just go to U.S. and study there for high school. So what if I apply for a boarding school? If I get in, will you let me go? And my dad's answer is absolutely. That's great. That's what we ultimately wanted for you. And my mom had a difficult time letting go, but ultimately decided that that's also good for me because the education system in China is very fierce. There's a lot of competitions. It's all about how much you can focus and excel in school and outside of school. More math classes, more physics classes. So she didn't necessarily want me to grow up in that environment. So she reluctantly agreed. So I just went online, looked for 14 or so boarding schools in America. I applied to all of them, and I got into this beautiful school on the website called Northwood. It's in New York. But it's beautiful. It's got like mountains, lakes, forests. I'm like, wow, right inside of New York City. That's beautiful. So I decided to go to that school. Little do I know that New York is also a state. And only knew when I landed in JFK. Right before that, the school sent out a communication saying that we will have a school bus come to pick you all up. Wow. We will actually stay in an airport hotel overnight, and then we'll drive out the next day. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of effort. I was gonna just take a taxi to go to the school. Little did I know, we drove out of New York City, drove into Albany, drove out of Albany, and then even close to 6 hours later, we finally landed in Lake Placid, New York, almost about 1 hour and a half from the U.S.-Canada border. So very up there. I actually thought that we were going to get kidnapped, by the teacher, because I'm like, why is nobody nervous about this? Like, this is clearly wrong. I finally saw the beautiful education buildings that I always see on the website.
Who else was on that bus? How many people were on that bus?
There's probably, I would say, 12 international students.
So all over, not just from China?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Adirondacks.
Yeah, but, I love to share that story with folks because I think that's when the sense of, I control my own life. I get to decide how I want to live my life. It's really a manifestation of that. It's the first prime example that I can give to people.
Yeah.
And I think that comes up again when I was happy with my work in KPMG. I find it really challenging. I find it really interesting. It's not very repetitive. I had great coworkers. But giving birth to my first child really changed that whole perspective in terms of, is this what I really wanted? Is this, working hundreds of hours on something that's somewhat arbitrary, where I don't get a lot of fulfillment. Yeah. I remember that I was talking to my mentor, whom I still connect to this day. Alicia, I asked her, how does she find meaning in this work?
Oh, I love that question.
First year in the job, I already sense the existential problem that I'm going to be facing working in this field. And she actually told me that I find meaning outside of work.
Yeah, some people operate that way too.
I find a lot of meaning in volunteering work that's, outside. I find meaning in my family.
Yeah, I really like the way you've said it on previous episodes through reading a Dr. Seuss book dozens of times.
Yeah.
In the sense of like the world is a great place to begin, but it could use some help.
Which is where you come in.
Which is where you come in.
Yeah.
And then you follow that up with saying, if I'm going to spend any time away from my family, it's got to be meaningful.
Yeah. I want to feel good that I'm spending time away from them. When I put them in daycare, it's not because I'm going to be sitting on a chair, browsing on Amazon, looking for things.
Yeah.
I actually feel good when I'm away, and I feel good when I return to them. And that's kind of the new territory that I'm navigating now that I have 2 children, what that really means. Because with Bo, with my second born, what I realized is that I really, really long to spend more time with them. But at the same time, I really want to grow Volition. So, it seems like I'm being pulled in 2 directions, but they're really in tangent with each other. They're really going in the same direction. I am trying to find meaning and fulfillment in both sides of my world. So, they both paths reach, ultimate level of contentment and fulfillment that I want to have for my life. It's just 2, for lack of a better term, 2 different aspects of my life. So, yeah.
But you're doing it.
As the best that I can. Yeah. So what I've decided to do is that I want to reduce my work hours. So I don't work on Mondays. I don't work on Fridays.
Okay.
So that I get to spend more time with Bo, spend more time on the family. We basically live in the forest up in Barrington area, suburb of Chicago. We have a beautiful garden that we work on really hard every year. There's just a lot to do that can add more colors to my life. That's outside of work and sometimes outside of childcaring too. Outside of motherhood that I would love to focus on. But so that allowed me to really focus my time and energy Tuesday through Thursday on building Volition and where we can go.
I know. It's like you kind of establish an hourly rate as far as for your work life, and it's like, but then when it comes to family life, it's invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't put a price on that. And recently, it's like if I can stack certain things on top of each other, like I bring my dogs to class, whereas I wouldn't have been able to do that at a fire department, or the previous place we were teaching at UIC prior to this. And I'm expecting to do the same thing when I have kids too. It's just like they're just coming with me.
Sure.
And that's not the case for every entrepreneur. But as an entrepreneur, I think you do have the most amount of agency in your life.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's one thing that I decided to really leave the corporate life and start my own is that I don't need to ask for permission anymore.
Yeah.
When you have a newborn, there are a lot of sick times. And every time, I do get the sick days off so that I can care for them. But every time I ask, it feels wrong. It feels like
guilty,
I'm asking extra of my employer. But now it's not. I get to call that, well, I guess I'm not working today. And that's totally fine because, Nolan or Bo or both of them need me. And it makes me feel good.
Yeah. As you're spending more time with your mom, does she share any regrets or things she would have done differently as a mom?
I think this is, I don't know if it's your experience, but even if they do feel it, they won't tell you. Right? It's like getting them to say sorry to you for tough times in your childhood. They will never do it, but they will
think
show it in other ways.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So does it come out? Do you notice certain things as she's spending more time, maybe as a grandmother now, but like as she continues to spend more time with you, that she's blossoming in different ways, in ways that you didn't see when you were a child?
I love that you used blossom.
Yeah.
What a beautiful way
Tea
to
reference.
say it. I definitely see a lot of overcompensation.
Okay.
So for the lack of time that she spent with me when I was growing up, she really wanted to be there for the grandchildren.
Yeah.
But what's interesting then is that we battle with this sharing of this infant's time or this toddler's time, because my partner and I are really hands-on parents. We very, very departing from the current dynamic between parents and grandparents in China. In China, because the pressure from making a living in China is so great that it's common for grandparents to be taking care of the grandchildren, and the parents really just focus on working and that. But for us, we really wanted to be there for our children. We make time for that. We prioritize spending time with them versus, in her eyes, spending time with them, goofing around versus, cleaning the house, which is more important, but we disagree. But she's tried to be there a lot, and the way that she interacts with my children is really beautiful. Sometimes I'm like, oh, you never did that for me. But I've already grown out of that phase. I think that I just learned to appreciate presence. I learned to appreciate. One thing that I held grudges against my parents for the longest time, but eventually I think it was during college time that I realized that they're just who they are.
And that's a more recent thing for me too.
And you, as children, I think you reach maturity when you accept them for who they are.
Okay.
I think in the teenage years and in early adulthood, we really try to work through it by expecting them to be better. By expecting them to come to the table with us.
Well, we have this brand new table with new tools on the table. Why aren't you coming to the table?
Because they can't see the tools. They refuse to see the tools. And you just learn to accept them for who they are. With my dad, he's always away. Growing up, I could only see my dad every 2 years.
Oh my goodness.
Now I still see him only every 2 years because he works so much, and he talks about how he loves this family and he really wants to be with me. And I remember reaching a breaking point. We had a huge fight over the phone because obviously he's in Kazakhstan and I'm in United States at the time. About how you keep saying that you care about me, that you want to spend time with me, but you're not. You clearly love your business more, but he couldn't accept that. He couldn't accept that's who he is. So he would tell me that that's not true, that he can love two things at once. But in my head, he clearly made a decision. He has made that decision his whole life, is that business
sometimes
is just more important.
Sometimes they can't help that either.
Than personal life. And I finally accepted that. I finally accepted that that's who he is. And everybody comes to this life with different purpose.
And baggage, though.
Yeah. Well, the baggage come along the way, right? You weren't born with the baggage.
But sometimes it gets passed down to you.
Sure. Yeah. That totally tracks.
I'm curious, what side your grandparents that you kind of were more familiar with, were they dad's side or mom's side?
Actually, neither. My mom is estranged from her parents, which is why I grew up with my grandparents' siblings. And my dad is much older. I don't have memories of my grandpa on my dad's side. I do have a lot of really beautiful pictures. My grandma is very old during my entire memory. of her, so we couldn't really communicate in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What makes you wonder why he's working so hard? Like, who is he proving this to?
I genuinely believe that people come to this life for different purposes. I think that he came to this life because he believed that he can do great in business, and that's what he wanted to do. I don't think that there is anybody who can truly be great at everything.
Yeah.
You make compromises along the
Pick
way.
one or two things.
And you eventually come to peace with what you can really be great at, and you try to focus on that.
Well, another theme that I've been wrestling with, or coming to terms with, is what's enough for you. As the EMT class is becoming more and more successful, at this point we had like 470 people on the wait list waiting to take our class, and previously it was 125 students, and we creatively shifted things around to accept 50 more students. Now, like, if I were to stretch that to, let's say, 200, it's like, what would I even do with all this extra money? It's like, what's enough to put a roof over the head and food on the table, and be comfortable. Beyond that, you're sacrificing probably time with family, time with friends, or whatever else you want to do, podcasting, like whatever you want to do. And so, is that something you're probably good with that right now because you've prioritized family so much.
Well, it's a constant balance.
Yeah.
You don't kind of just reach equilibrium and stay there, because your life throws interesting challenges at you all the time. I was going to say that one thing that would make sense for you to continue to grow the EMT classes is if you find more purpose in teaching, right? Beyond just, this is a good source of revenue for my family. And for us, it's the same way. With Volition, I felt like I had a good balance because I have a 5-year-old. I spend years trying to find that equilibrium, and I feel like I finally found it. Yeah. So with my toddler, I feel like I have a good balance. I know that how much time that I want to spend on work, and how much I wanted to spend time on him, and how much I wanted to spend on my personal hobbies. But then, we introduced a newborn, and before even that, we went through IVF, and that was an excruciating and very long process that I had to reprioritize different aspects of my life to fit that into our life.
If you can share, because we're going through something similar. When you say shift things around, is that like financially or just time wise or mentally? Like what were you shifting around?
All of that. We live in America. We need health insurance, right?
Yeah.
So that means that if I get to take this adventure with Volition, my partner is stuck with his work, right? Because somebody needs to have the steady, good health insurance, which is so unfortunate, and that's a whole different topic that we can talk
I owe
hours long.
23 G's. I was hospitalized over Thanksgiving.
Oh my gosh.
I was uninsured.
What happened?
And I had abdominal pain for 3 days, and through an abdominal CT scan, they found an obstruction. And I was born with a pouch on my small intestine, and that pouch got filled, and the obstruction dislodged and obstructed somewhere else.
Oh my gosh.
And surgery was the only definitive answer. And so they scheduled surgery for the next morning and got it out, and did a resection of the bowels, and they kept me until my bowels woke up. So every morning the residents would come in and be like, "Are you pooping or tooting?" I'm like, "Nope." So I stayed there for a week. It took that long. And it's hard to muster up the energy to do laps around the unit when you're not eating anything. But that's what they recommended to get the bowels to wake up. And after the fact, I'm home. It took a month to recover. I initially owed like $46,000. That was already 50% off, which is another question in healthcare as far as like if you're self-insured, they give you a discount for being self-insured because they don't have to go through the bureaucracy of insurance. But that being said, you have to be pretty well off to be able to do that as well. So I applied for financial aid, and then they took off another 25%. So I, at the moment, owe $23,000.
Wow.
And luckily, I hear that it doesn't affect your credit score, so I'm just kind of pushing it off until I can. But it's essentially a car note, like $700 every month to pay this off.
Yeah.
I don't even know where we're at.
I think you started on that when I mentioned IVF.
Yeah. So with that, did it work for you? Did IVF work?
Yeah.
It worked?
That's how Bo was born. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how Bo is in our life. It's a long journey that I think everybody know that IVF is hard. I don't think that people know how difficult it is. My toddler Nolan actually thinks that's how you get pregnant is through daily injections.
He would see you do the injections?
Yeah,
Okay.
my partner is very afraid of needles, but Nolan is there with me every day.
Oh, wow.
He reminds me that I need to take my shots, and he's there to witness me doing it every day.
Amazing.
Yeah. He's an incredible child, really sensitive, very in tune with his emotions. Very early on, he would... there's one episode that I love to share was everybody. It was we were making apple turnovers at home. We love baking, all of us, and so my partner was teaching him how to press down the dough. So he pressed on the dough, and then he grabbed the apple and he pressed on the apple against the counter. And my partner's like, "Whoa, you're not supposed to do that. You're bruising the apple." Kind of just reactionary, furious at him. And then Nolan just took a step back. Nolan was like, "That's very strong emotions from you. I am disappointed in you, Dad. And I'm very upset, so I'm going to sit by the window now." So he went to sit by the window for 2 minutes, and then he came back when he felt better.
How mature.
I know, right? More than a lot of the adults that we know in our life.
So what
me
was
included sometimes.
Your partner's reaction? Was that an immediate gut check of like,
oh, absolutely. Just shame on you, all right? So we all learn, we say that millennials are the generation that's going to relearn and unlearn a lot of things that we accepted as truth growing up, because that is not the truth. And we
so.
try to be better parents.
I hope so. I know our parents sometimes seem stuck in their ways and are unwilling to change. And I am curious if we will ever experience things that we're unwilling to change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have zero doubt that Nolan and Bo, at some point in their life, they're going to be sit in a therapy session, across from their therapist, and said, "It all started with my mom when I was 5. I'm sure that will happen because you can always do better, right? There are always things that we are not conscious of, that we don't know that we were in the wrong. We thought that that's the truth, just like how our parents were."
Yeah. Do you feel like you were more or less courageous enough to pursue this IVF path, or more or less courageous when you immigrated to, or took the plane to New York for boarding school?
I think when I took the plane to New York City by myself, it was out of desperation.
Yeah.
That I felt like that was the only way out, that I could have peace of mind, that I could not have so much hate and so much frustration in my head all of the time. So I think that it had a lot to do with escaping my reality to form my own reality out of desperation. And I think with IVF, it was a conscious choice. I wouldn't say that it's more courageous. I think it's just a path that we decided to go on. It was difficult, but I did it with my partner who's very supportive. I did it with a toddler who's very supportive. I don't see it as a courageous move.
Well, some might, IVF is a last, ditch effort, sometimes out of desperation because of this strong desire to start a family. I mean, if we had the options, I don't think people would choose IVF. Like, it's just like, it's an option for sure. But like, if you could do it naturally, let's do it naturally.
Absolutely.
Right?
So we tried it for a couple years and nothing happened, which is very different than when we had Nolan. So we decided to do IVF, but we were only going to do it once. And because we would love for him to have a sibling, but we don't desire that much to have me go through. I know that sometimes women feel selfish to call it quit, but I don't. I think that, I need to prioritize on what I want, because, if you see so many women, so many moms, in the prior generations, they compromise, right? They make a lot of compromises, but the frustration and the resentment manifest in different ways. They eventually come out.
As far as losing your identity.
Yeah, totally. They get resented by doing too many chores that people are not supporting them, right? Like we hear it all the time that mom's like, I will do everything, and then they, lash out on you for not doing anything. So I want to make sure that I won't be like that for my children and for my partner, that I just need to come out and be really real with me, to understand what I really want, so that I can tell them what I really want, so that so that they won't be responsible for the decision that I did not make for my life.
And you won't get resentful.
Yeah.
Because you made that choice.
Yeah. Or try not to be.
So going back to boarding school, what was it like to be surrounded by different cultures then? Because when we were pre-recording, we were talking about Katie Chung and how she wanted to be immersed by people that look like her.
That's really interesting. I had a quite unique experience in that up on until that point, I identify myself as somebody from Xinjiang. Even though I lived in different parts of the world, Xinjiang is where I really found roots because of the people. People are very generous. People are very warm to you. They always, people fight to pay the bill. Even as teenagers, when you're just spending your parents' money, you would fight to pay the bill, and you want to spend time, create space to hang out and have a community. And that's what I know. I would say that I had more culture shock at the boarding school amongst other Chinese students than I did with other American students.
Wow.
Because I got to see how different parts of China, people from different parts of China really interact differently.
Wow.
And, boarding school, especially on the East Coast, they attract a different breed of people. They're generally very wealthy family.
Sure.
A lot of them are trouble kids, which is why their parents sent them to boarding schools. So we had a lot of drug problems, actually.
Oh, that's interesting. You don't have to test into it?
No, I never taken a drug test.
I guess that's what I associate boarding school with. Is like it's for those that are academically inclined, right?
I assume you mean drug test.
Oh, no. It's just like those that are crushing it in, let's say, public school, and just like what else is out there, and their parents have the means and see these opportunities to, like, let's set them up for success. Maybe go into this boarding school, line them up to Yale or Harvard or any of the Ivy Leagues, and that was my initial perception of boarding school.
There definitely are. I think the top tier boarding schools are. But this one isn't quite there. I not really jokingly, call it the hockey school. Because up north there, people are really into hockey.
Okay.
Hockey is really big. So a lot of athletes come to the school.
Okay.
In troubled kids
Interesting.
from really wealthy families. So I got to just see a different side of the world. I thought that I lived a really comfortable life. My parents are relatively wealthy in my part of the hood until I met all of these people who just spend insane amount of money for nothing. And that was quite a bit of a cultural shock. to me.
Okay, so you saw it as pretty wasteful. Did you develop any rough edges while you were immersed in that scenario?
Not really. I think I was set in my ways very early on.
Okay.
Because I was just by myself, so I have to
Yeah.
find myself, and I moved around so much that
Yeah.
you kind of are forced to develop your own identity before the world mold you into different shapes.
So then did you become a magnet? Like they say, build it and they will come. So like did you become a magnet for those that aligned with your values?
I think I mostly just kept to myself.
Yeah.
I was studying a lot. I did have, in China, you learn the English as the language very early on, as early as kindergarten. But it's not the same when you are in that immersive environment. There's so much catching up that I had to do in terms of learning the vocabulary,
Culture,
learning how
yeah.
to communicate. There's just a lot to keep me occupied. It was really in college when I actually share with people that, for people who don't have English as their first language, or, in any environment where you coming in as a foreigner, despite having the passport, you might be an outgoing personality in your native language. When you are forced into a new environment with a completely different language, you become introverted.
Yeah.
And then you have this process. You have to go through this process, this journey of breaking that shell to be your extroverted self in that language. And it takes a long time. And I feel like I didn't really achieve that until probably middle of college.
Okay. I mean, when you say that, it reminds me of just Asian Americans getting that reputation
Sure.
of being introverted or soft-spoken, and it's probably due to a variety of reasons. I recently kind of discovered that like maybe I am initially observant and introverted because I have set high standards for when to speak. And it's like speak when you're spoken to, as well as speak when you have something of value to say. But I agree with that. It's like when you go to like a family party, whether that's Chinese, Korean, Filipino, I mean, they do karaoke at Filipino parties. I mean, it's just like, I'm sure it's like staying up till 2-3 in the morning, just catching up and chit-chatting, and it's a good time. But in a different setting. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense now. So much sense. So then that being said, when did you, like, did you have a purpose for studying? Was it just for college? But like, did you have like an intention towards a specific degree in college? And I know people ask you like how you came to Chicago, it's UIUC. But even before that, it's like, where did you think you'd go and pursue? Yeah,
that's a great question. I because both my parents are in business, that's where I landed for no specific purpose or drive. It was, I think so much of the education system where it fails us is seemingly it's just this linear path that you have to go through, right? You start with kindergarten, you're in elementary school, you're in middle school, you're in high school, you're in college. And all of a sudden, as soon as you graduate, it's like the world is your oyster and people feel lost. People don't understand where to go next. I think that's where you hit your quarter life crisis because you thought that this is the path, right? Like in college, I study accounting, and the paths are very clear. You either go to public accounting, or you go in-house to a corporation or company, or you go to consulting. So these are kind of the general path that you can go into. And once you're like, okay, out of the three, I can still make a choice because it's finite. It's very few choices. I can make a choice, and I go in, and then people are like, whoa, this is not what I wanted. But where do I go from there? I think that the education system really failed us in giving us the tools to understand the options out there and giving us the ability to assess what's actually for us.
Now, when you say education system, would you start it as early as elementary school or high school? The opportunities to poke and probe and explore your interests and joys and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, especially I think with Asian parents, right? You know, my parents aren't necessarily tiger parents, but they really see academics as the one true path that I need to just be on, you know, not focusing on all the other aspects of life. And I see the life that we've created for Nolan Bo, and it's so much richer. You know, we chose to live in the forest in Barrington because Barrington has a Mandarin immersion program where half of day, every day, it's complete Chinese.
Oh, wow.
So he will be learning learning math and science in Mandarin. That's incredible because that means he doesn't have to go to language schools on the weekend. You know, so many of my friends,
Sunday
oh my
Chinese
God.
school.
Yeah, exactly. They just absolutely hated it, right?
PTSD,
It's traditional way of teaching. I'm far away from my family.
Wow.
I'm away from my friends, and only reject so long and so much only for them to be in their late 20s regretting that they didn't take the class seriously because they wish that they really mastered the language.
Yeah.
So we decided to move out there so that he can just have that immersive environment during the school time, and then he can still be a kid on the weekend. You know, we live in the forest. We have a pond in front of us, so he goes fishing, you know, when it's not freezing, and he goes ice skating on the lake when, you know, it's winter time and it's safe to be on the lake. We go on a walk every single day just in our forest. Unfortunately, he recently developed an allergy to pollen, which makes it pretty difficult. But without that, it's so great. And he got to explore different aspects of life, that life is so much more than just work. You know, our parents did that a lot of them did that out of necessity, right? During that generation, if you work hard enough, you have a good life. And that's the truth.
Yeah.
That's the source of truth that they had. But for us, it's very different now.
I think about that a lot recently as far as not putting enough time into thinking about things like what you want to do with your life, who you want to do it with, and where you want to do it. Your kids, or people in general, don't have a choice as far as where they're born, what religion they're born into, the people that they're born with. So prioritizing family manifests through picking where you want to live, and through that, relationships form, opportunities blossom. I remember working almost every position available at Inverness Golf Club in high school, and that was probably one aspect of a coming of age for me as far as seeing how the other side lives. So despite growing up in Palatine, we were definitely middle class, had everything we ever needed, but a private golf club like Inverness Golf Club, that opens your eyes to like what else is possible like that. So entry level positions that, you know, you carry clean clubs for people, but like you just overhear conversations and how people participate in their world, and it's a great opportunity if they're ever interested in that when they're of that age, I think 15, 16. But yeah, it's really cool to hear how much time you've put into that, and it's going to set them up for success.
Yeah, we definitely spend a lot of time thinking about the life that we wanted them to have. There's obviously the doubt in my mind that maybe he won't like it. Yeah. You know, we spend all this energy moving to the suburb. I never thought that I would live in the suburb. Moving to the suburb, my commute is an hour and 20 minutes. It's tough one way. But there's definitely a doubt that maybe one day he would just tell me, Mom, I don't like this. I just want to go to a normal public school. And I have to be okay with that because at least I presented the opportunity. I did my part. Right? I presented you with an opportunity that you could have an immersive environment. And if you don't like that, that's okay too.
Are there a number of iterations where you want them to give it a shot before you just let it go?
I think the biggest difference in millennials being parents and our parents is that we have more curiosity. I think having more curiosity goes a long way. Instead of just saying, okay, or saying no, I want to ask why. Why do you not want to do it? And sometimes it's never, right? Like when you are a toddler or even when you're a teenager, you thought that you know the answer, but if you pry deeper enough, you realize that's not the reason. So we try to have these conversations with them, even though he's only 5. But it already come up, right? Like he's in Taekwondo. He has always been really committed in Taekwondo ever since he's 3. He's been in it. At beginning, he was doing it 4 times a week just because he wanted to.
Nice.
Now it's twice a week. There are times in this journey where he's like, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm like, why? It's like, I don't know. And then you're like, okay, we can talk about it another time.
I like that.
When you're ready, you know, to think more about it and tell me why you don't like it anymore.
Okay.
And sometimes he would be like, the teachers are too strict. Like, why are they strict? Oh, because I wanted to talk to my friend and he told me not to. I'm like, well, when you're talking to your friend, can you hear the teacher? It's like, no. I'm like, okay, do you want to hear the teacher? Yes. Right? So staying curious and having these conversations with them.
It goes both ways, huh? Yeah. You're not only just vicariously living through them, but you remind yourself to be a kid again and to have that open-mindedness, that curiosity. Xiang Wang, a comedian, came to town recently and shared a bit about spending time with his friends who are all parents now around the bonfire. And one of their toddlers came up to them and asked, like, Dad, how does the moon work? And all of their friends were like, yeah, Dad, how does the moon work? Does he know? So it's not accepting the answer of like it's the way it's always been done. You know, it's such a lazy answer. And then if you don't know the answer, look it up. I don't know.
Exactly. Parenthood is a humbling experience in a lot of times. You just have to be as parent. You know, I just remember growing up, I see my parents as the absolute authority, right? They are absolutely perfect. They know everything. And I think we have so much resentment and grudges or negative feelings against our parents because we put them at this unrealistic pedestal. So it's actually really liberating now as a parent to be comfortable with the unknown, to be comfortable of saying, I actually don't know. Or, you know, when I'm sad, I can tell him, I'm actually really sad right now. I need to sit with my emotions for a little bit. Can you give me some space? For them to see you're not just a god, you are a human being, you're vulnerable, you don't know a lot of things. Sometimes they know more than you do. Nolan would tell me that's not true. It's because this. And that might not be the real answer, but you know, he feels empowered to tell me no. And I love that.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing.
This has turned into a parenting.
That's what I'm saying. Episode. I love this. So I guess if we were to come back to Volition, you've said this on previous episode, but you got to make a mark on. We got to make a note on the traceability that you've been able to achieve. The transparency, the ability for other tea purveyors to potentially work with these farmers, and for you to lose that relationship, potentially, you're risking that. But I have a feeling that because you've been doing this, it's paid off, and they have this level of trust with you that you're going to do them justice, and you're not just them justice, but the tea industry justice. And you know what? On the way here. I've been listening to your episodes for like nonstop, like probably 6 times each all 3 episodes. And it's pretty insane that it wasn't where it is. Like it took this long. It took Volition. It took you coming up with Volition, and establishing these relationships to eventually shine a light on the work that tea farmers are doing. I had no idea that it was pretty much a readily consumable product from the farmer. And all we're doing is putting it on the shelves and bringing it to the consumers.
Yeah.
And they don't get the credit. And what you're doing is essentially celebritizing by look at this picture. I don't know if this camera can see it, but they've put pictures on the branding. It's great to be able to put a face. And to be honest, my second impression was like, these farmers are young.
They are. He's a fellow millennial, Yang Jie.
And I love that. I love that so much. And it's, I don't know, it's so incredible what you've been able to do with Volition. And I'm sure it's going to pay off in dividends decades down the line, beyond us.
That would be great. I think a dividend in terms of transformation of the industry, having more players who do similar things, if not the same thing, or doing it even better than what we are doing, is the dividend that I look forward to.
Yeah. Speak to me about how you've been able to come up with, I don't know how you described it, but you want to ensure that they are taken care of after the harvest, despite potentially losing that harvest. But that being said, you have this very high bar that you've set for no pesticides or fertilizers as well. And I know you've kind of navigated it's organic, but it's not officially, USDA organic because of how expensive it is. But that being said, you are self-imposing these high standards for yourself, and your consumers can rest assured that they're getting very high quality single origin tea.
Yeah. So, obviously with the high bar of no pesticides, I think there are countless studies now that show the detriments that pesticides have on us, hormonally. I actually listened to a very interesting podcast, I think on Huberman, talking about how there is, people talk about there is a low birth rate among human, and there are a lot of socioeconomic reasons for that. But actually, there is a low birth rate across all species. And scientists largely attribute to pesticides as the leading factor that lowers the birth rate across the board. It's very clear that there are a lot of harms that's being done by pesticides. So when I started the tea company, practically speaking, commercially, you want to find your unique angle, right, for your business. And despite there are so few people who are doing 100% transparency, I don't see that as an incredibly difficult thing to do. If you look hard enough, you will find them. They are far and few between, but you will be able to. What's really difficult is really on the farm, is really to combating the mass repopulation of insects and how to work with climate change to continue doing right by the land and by the people who rely on it. And, to give you an example, with tea plants, they really love acidic soil. So traditionally, if I ask you to close your eyes, picture a perfect tea garden, you're probably seeing rows of tea bushes going infinite, right? That beautiful picture that every tea purveyor shows you. But that's monocrop. And very similarly, in coffee and all the other plants, when you have monocrop, you have pest problems because the insects evolve, right? And they will continuously combat against your pesticide usage to become even more fierce, to still be able to make damage on your farm. So you use a lot of heavy pesticides and acidic fertilizer to propel growth, to increase your productivity. But most tea plants are grown at subtropical and tropical environment, which is high precipitation. So when you have heavy rainfall, that leads to acidic soil running off into your water source. So now you have poor water source for every single person who lives nearby who rely on that water source.
Oh, I see.
So for all of our farmers, they decided to forgo pesticide usage. They decided to forgo chemical fertilizer and only use organic or homemade fertilizers because they saw the damage that's being done firsthand. Not because it's popular in the West to have an organic product. Most of our tea purveyors, most of our tea producers, they actually predominantly serve the domestic market.
Okay.
We are frequently their only foreign purveyor.
Okay.
So they don't care about organic as much in China. It's all very similar in the wine industry. It's all about terroir. It's all about, the prestige of a particular region. That's what sells your tea, not so much whether it's organic or not. So they made that conscious choice.
Yeah.
And the Volition, the name, is a homage, pays tribute to that.
Okay.
Because they decided themselves that they want to do it right. Day after day, year
Wow.
after year, which is incredibly difficult to do because there are many times, we've only existed for 3 years, but I've already seen many times where they decided on this date to go in to harvest and they walk in and it's already all bug bitten and they have to find ways to work with them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, when you first started, you had eight teas, and 7 out of 8 of them tested for no pesticides, no fertilizers, which is amazing. I was going to ask, like, when you first established these relationships, whether or not they made that decision already, but it sounds like they were.
Yeah, because so much of farmland in China started as traditional farming.
Okay.
So it means you will introduce pesticides, you will introduce chemical fertilizers. To make the transition is unbelievably difficult.
Is it one season? Does it take multiple seasons for
multiple
them to make,
seasons?
Does it? Okay.
So you need to completely shut down your operation. Even if you try to do it one patch at a time, it wouldn't necessarily be sufficient because there's wind, right? So you would spray pesticides on one side. If there's a wind blowing, it blows to the side that you intend.
Because I was going to ask if they do other
keep it.
things besides tea, right? Just this offset kind of if the teas don't work out, can they use other crops?
Yeah, so the soil, and if they already have the tea plants and the soil must rest and find their own ways to rejuvenate, to find their own ways to have vitality, because you are no longer introducing acidic fertilizers. So they need to find nutrients themselves. And you are supplying, homemade or organic fertilizers might not be enough acidity. So how do they have to be reborn to find their own ways to have the vitality. In a few years of resting, you finally start growing them again.
So what is that way? Because you can't change precipitation, right? So eventually, if you continue adding that acidity, isn't that just going to run off into the water eventually?
Yeah, which is why a lot of them, decades ago, decided to do the
So the soil
organic.
is just no longer acidic.
Well, you can make your homemade, right? You can make your homemade fertilizer. So it's not zero fertilizer.
It's not whether or not it's acidic or not.
It's no chemical fertilizer to have extreme amount of acidity into the soil. It's homemade, it's organic fertilizers. So you're still helping it to grow, but it's undoubtedly less acidic than the traditional.
You shared that they've gotten creative and would plant sugarcane and things like that. Has that worked? Has that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so all of them continue to this day, completely free of pesticides, so they find ingenious way to do it. Some would grow sugarcane and stone fruit trees, that sweetness to attract the pest away from the tea bushes. And some of them grow at elevation, so that colder environment means that you will be able to harvest the leaves before the insects start repopulating and wipe away your crop.
Oh man, once you get to the peak of the mountain, because climate change is it's not going to change anytime soon.
No,
it gets hotter and hotter.
Exactly. So we've noticed the harvesting day gets earlier and earlier now.
Scary.
Yeah.
Are there 2 times that they harvest? Is it after spring and after summer?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So technically, a tea plant can be harvested up to 11 times a year, but that's over extraction. You see that commonly at large plantations where they're just trying to get to the volume. For all of our farmers, they harvest typically 4 to 5 times at max. There are farmers who actually only harvest 3 times a year because, for example, a white tea producer, white tea has the simplest processing. So with really simple processing. What's really key is what's called plucking standard. So the whether you are plucking buds only or one bud and one leaf, one bud and two leaves, that's what's really important. So they really selectively harvest leaves and they let the tea plants rest for the
By
rest
hand.
of them. Yes.
Yeah, of course. Oh my goodness.
Most of them, grow at an elevation, so that means the machine harvesting isn't
Can't
really
even get
available.
up there.
Yeah.
Oh wow. So much respect for that.
Yeah, so much work. It's beyond plucking too. With Big Red Robe, this tea go through 4 months of production. So you would start harvesting in late April or early May, and it go through lots of different process. And then at the end, it's a 3-time charcoal roasted oolong over the course of 3 months. So you would roast at the beginning of the month, let it rest for the remainder of the month, bring it onto charcoal to roast again, and repeat 3 times to get it to this beautiful product at the end. So most people don't know about that. Like people think there's so many misconceptions about tea on the market. So much of it is education, what we do, especially now that we're in Whole Foods. We have to go in there regularly to have that education. First, to let people know that you can find a premium loose leaf tea product at Whole Foods now. And second, what is it? What is a oolong? What is a red tea? And most people think, green tea comes from a green tea plant and black tea comes from a black tea plant. And that's not true. They all come from one single plant called Camellia sinensis. And when we were talking about oolong or green or red or black, that's really different production methods. So you can technically use the same cultivar, the same leaves, and just produce them into different types of teas. So that's actually what we do with one of the farmers, Li Shaoling, who's I call him grandpa. He's over 80 years old, but he's very creative. What he likes to do, he on his very small, relatively small tea garden, he has over 20 different cultivars. Typically at a tea garden, you have 4 to 5 different ones. He has so many because he loves experimenting. He loves just walking in his tea garden, munch on the fresh leaves, and brainstorming on creative ways to make it into something special. So he frequently does this where he harvests a batch and he makes them into 5 different styles to see what the result would be and what would actually surprise him.
Yeah, that sounds like kind of a side tangent. Chef Otto from Kyoten for sushi. I feel like he's just playing now in his sushi shop as opposed to his next door shop. I mean, they're still playing and having a great time, but it's more standardized, whereas he gets to be playful with the fish and everything else on his side. That's wonderful. With that first batch, did you find out what happened with the one that didn't test well?
I think simply put, where we're not pointing fingers and putting blames, people just have different standard on what sustainable farming is, right? It's a overly broad term, and people just have different criteria on what meets it. Similar with premium, right? If you have to count how many tea companies out there who claim that they have premium loose leaf tea or premium tea in general, it's probably all of them. All of them are serving you premium teas. It's a very subjective term. So with that farmer, he believed that he was farming sustainably. He was only spraying pesticides to kill the weeds around it. But it still got to the plant. And that's where it's a hard decision for us, because we understand this tea is beautiful. We understand the quality of it, and we think that it's marketable. We understand the story of the farmers, and we would like to tell that stories. And they give us a valid reason why pesticides exist in the pesticide residual report. But we cannot take this tea because we don't know. We are not at the farm every day, seeing how it's done. So we have to draw the line somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, would the consumer be able to pick up on the nuances of pesticides?
Some say that they do have a headache when they drink something with pesticides. I think everybody's experience is valid. I don't know if that has scientific truth to it.
Erring on the side of, let's say a consumer wouldn't even feel anything, but you've set, like I said, self-imposed standards. That's so cool. It's amazing.
There are so many tea farmers that we could tell the stories of.
Yeah.
So we have to be selective somehow. And I think that that's a fair criterion to have, because it's incredibly difficult to do. That makes their stories much more worth telling.
Yeah, there was one tea farmer that you shared that had to go back to pesticides and fertilizers.
Yes, it's very unfortunate because she's also a woman producer. We would love to support continuously. She is actually friends with a lot of our producers. It's a really small knit community.
Yeah.
Once you start doing true organic farming in China, you kind of know each other.
Cool.
She had to go back because they took on so much loan to do organic farming. But with it being completely pesticides free, you run a lot of risks, and there are not many ways to hedge that risk. So the risk is always there that the pest could wipe away your crop, and that's what happened to her.
So have you remained in communication? Like, is there still a desire to come back to organic farming?
The question is why. Why do that from their perspective? It's so much easier to do traditional farming, and I have to acknowledge that. I have to respect that.
Okay.
Not everybody can do this in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Because they don't see the end benefit. I mean, they do see it in terms of the water's cleaner, the soil's cleaner, but if everybody else around you is doing that, and they're already doing the damage on the river, you have to ask yourself constantly, what am I doing this for? And if I am not their major buyer, and they predominantly serve the local community, there's actually very little financial reason.
It's very cool that you make it make sense, or like it makes sense to you, and you've accepted that.
I have.
There's no other there's no other way.
So I think a lot of volition and all the decisions that we had to make are incredibly easy to make because we have the North Star of telling the stories of the farmers and preserving that humanity, right? And if we are claiming that that's what we do, I have to accept that, because that is humanity. That is the compromise that they just have to make. It's their personal value that they wanted to do it right. They wanted to do organic farming, but everything is up against that. Their livelihood is on the line. Who am I to tell them that, hey, if you stick it out 2 more years, I might become your major buyer, that I can sustain that for you. Yeah.
Which in a way, it weeds out the individuals that really want to do it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, I don't like to use the phrase weed out.
Okay.
They're human beings.
Filter, I don't know. It's just like not weed out, but like
really have the people who are doing the right
people who want to do it.
Yeah,
they're there.
Yeah.
That whole sentiment reminds me of recycling and how people choose to participate in this act of recycling, and this leap of faith and trusting the process that what you are recycling is going to actually be recycled. Yeah. So with the 3 years that you've been doing this, and the farmers that you've been cultivating relationships with, have you noticed a sentiment from them, like of hope, that the tides are turning, even within the 3 years, that you are doing them and the tea industry justice through volition?
I don't think so.
Oh, shoot.
I think that it's a cool thing. It's a cool thing that we're putting their name out there. It's a cool thing that we have their face out there. it's a cool thing when we attract other buyers to them, which actually happened.
Okay.
So it's a it's a real-time testament of what we want to do with 100% traceability is that other purveyors have found them, and that's okay. It's all really cool.
Yeah.
But what really matters to them is stability, is financial outlook, right? And so if I can continue being there to purchase their teas, that's all they care about. I've shown Yang Jie that people have used his bigger robe in very creative ways.
Yeah.
I've done collaboration with Michelin star restaurants who use his tea. It's all really cool. He loves hearing that, and he loves that he finally have a two-way channel with a foreign purveyor where he can, for the first time, hear how consumers feel about his tea. That's all really cool, but that's the extent, I think, of the sentiment that they have in partnering with me, and that's okay. Eventually, I hope that we grow large enough to be their major buyer, but I also feel complicated feelings about that, because when you become a tea farmer's major buyer, the dynamic changes. You all of a sudden have a lot of buying power. They feel like they have to give you a discount. They feel like they must rely on you. So I kind of enjoy just being one of their purveyors versus the major purveyor.
But if you got to that point, I don't think you would take advantage of that situation.
Yeah, that's totally fair, and we won't. But yeah.
What is that? So what needs to happen in order for you to become a major buyer? Like, is that distributing amongst like at least every state? Like, what does that look like?
Sure, it all depends. Depends on the size of production in each tea garden. So, for example, going back to our grandpa Li Shaoling, he has over 20 cultivars. He is just having fun with it. So every batch is like 2 kilo.
Yeah.
So we actually are his major buyer because, in China, the entire tea industry is very established in that there are these many known teas. And the packagings are already created. It's all genetic packaging, actually, especially for smaller farms. So you just go buy a bigger roll packaging. You go buy a Dragon Wall packaging. But for him, it's really difficult. He has 2 kilo of this tea that nobody heard of. Like, nobody has heard of Beauty's Ways. Nobody has heard of White Heart. So he packaged them into a brown bag and tried to sell it, or sell it to corporations who are distributing them as a internal employee benefit.
Okay.
So that's where we swoop in and we say we like to have all of them because they're so fun and creative and delicious. And we sell it here. We take on the burden of the packaging for him. Versus Dragon Well or Bigger Robe, they have enormous production. So it would be incredibly difficult to become their major buyer.
Okay.
But what's different to them, I hope, is this relationship that I'm building with them. I'm connected with them on WeChat every week, every 2 weeks, just chatting about life updates, sharing baby pictures. And that's what makes it really different. So, going back to what you said about how potentially other purveyors can find them and I could lose the business, I don't think I will.
Yeah.
Because to them, they all call me 小妹妹, little sister. Despite, if I call them grandpa or uncle, they all call me 小妹妹. Actually, 美国小妹妹, the little sister from America. I think that we've developed a strong enough relationship that they would never just cut the business.
Yeah.
But even if they did, for reasons that they believe are valid, I have to respect that. I firmly believe that the only way that they would cut this relationship is if they find better deals out there. And that's good for them. We are a small business. We can pay what we can pay, and we don't negotiate with these farmers. They tell me how much they wanted me to pay, and I pay that. But if somebody comes in and they say, we want to pay you more and buy all of it, that's great for them, right?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate for me and for my tea drinkers that we don't get to have that tea, but hopefully that tea is available to my consumers.
Well, that's an interesting juxtaposition to your shirt.
Yeah.
Right? Right? It's like we care about the farmer, so it's people, but they're also making more profit, but it's for them. I don't know. It's like it's so interesting.
Sure, yeah.
That dynamic.
It's profit for who, right?
That. Oh, okay. I see.
If they need the profit to have betterment of their life, if they need the profit to have the financial stability.
And that sentiment that we talked about earlier about like, what do you really need? Like, how much do you really need? I'm sure they share that. If I were to guess, they share that sentiment too.
Yeah.
Of being aware of like, what do they actually need? They're not trying to screw over all the other small businesses. It's like, what's enough? That's it. I'm going to draw the line there, and I want to continue working with Annie because Annie's a good person.
Yeah. Think of how much work it is on the ground. They really don't have time for a lot of nonsenses, is what they call it. They don't have time to do marketing. They don't have time to negotiate. They don't have time to seek out buyers out there. You will have to be very established to have a team to do that. But for farmers who are in the field caring for their tea plants all year round, and you have very narrow window to harvest. And once you harvest, all of them sleep in their factories. They have their benches that they sleep on because once they harvest, you have to wither them to get the excessive moisture out, and immediately you have to start the next production process in order to preserve the freshness of the teas. So they really don't have time for that. So yeah, a lot of it is when again and again I go back to the word stability. They're just looking for stability.
Yeah. I love that so much. Before hopping off, I wanted to touch a little bit more on mocha. As well. I saw a beautiful reel that Jeremy, whom I've never met in person, but he made a cocktail and made a reel out of it. And I guess, which is a good point to say, like, I first came across Volition at Side Practice, and then again at Danielle's studio, meeting you for the first time, and then most recently at Del Sur with Justin. And just like we're just talking against the wall, and Justin's like, who you got to chat with? Annie. Just points at the tea on the wall, and I'm like, I think it's about time. So all to say, do you feel like there's a renaissance of mocha at this point? And I liked how you collectively helped distinguish on the menu that it's Chinese matcha, right?
Well, I would actually give a lot of credit to Justin and the team for deciding to put Chinese matcha on their big menu wall. It's incredible. I owe so much debt to that. It seems small, but the amount of opportunities of education that they triggered from just putting the Chinese before the matcha on their menu is enormous.
Huh?
Yeah. They tell me how it's so funny. People come to the counter and say, can I order a Chinese matcha? And then, undoubtedly that gives a lot of time to ruminate on why. Why do you put Chinese matcha? Why do you source a Chinese matcha? Why do you serve it? And what's the story behind it? I wouldn't say that there is a renaissance of
Not
Chinese
yet, at least.
matcha, not yet. But there is a strong momentum, and I am grateful for every single customer who recommends it to others, and I am grateful for every single wholesale partner who proudly serve it and tell people it's Chinese matcha. There is so much stigma against Chinese matcha, and in large, Chinese products in general, but specifically Chinese matcha because people obviously all know Japanese matcha, and they take it as the absolute best. I think that people tend to make through decades of trial and error, and there are some truth to it, but people make this global statement that all Japanese matcha is good and all Chinese matcha is bad. which is not true both ways. There are some poor quality matcha coming out of Japan, and there are exceptional quality matcha coming out of China too. And I think I really want people to understand that this practice of tea powder really originated in China. And what we are doing at Volition is partnering with farmers who wanted to reclaim the lost art of matcha making.
Yeah.
I tell people that latte art actually is ancient. Back in time, powdered tea is how Chinese consumed tea before loose leaf. Predominantly people consume powdered tea, and because it's not properly shaded like the modern matcha, the foam is actually white. And so they would whisk up the powdered tea, and they will create a thin layer of white foam, and they will dip their pan into tea water and make latte art on it, make tea art on it. I want people to, again, going back, even parenthood, business, it's all the same. It's staying curious and having the compassion to be curious and to understand that when you're dissing about Chinese matcha, you're dissing the producers behind it. You're dissing a whole culture who is trying hard to honor this modern practice of how matcha is made. It was the Japanese who modernized matcha making, powder making, by properly shading the tea plants and meticulously destemming each leaves and stone milling it to get it to the vibrant, beautiful matcha that you know of. And all of our farmers are doing the same. They wanted to reclaim it, so they worked with the largest tea company in China called Zhejiang Tea Group to infuse capital, so that they actually had Japanese matcha instructors come to them, teach them the proper way of growing tencha, which is raw material for matcha, and how to make it into what the West believe as ceremonial grade. Sidebar, ceremonial grade is a term that's completely invented in the West that Japanese don't even use. But there is just so much stigma. I think people, when they approach a cafe, we recently had a cafe partner who told me that somebody walked in and they asked them where is their matcha from, and they said, oh, it's a Chinese matcha. And before giving an opportunity to even explain more, they walked out. And when I first heard it, there's a lot of emotions that's going through my mind, and I feel I feel hurt. I feel like we had a lost opportunity. I felt, why did this person not have enough curiosity and compassion to ask more questions? This is a specialty coffee store, so why do they offer something that's subpar in my mind? Now, if you stayed and asked that question, it's a completely new and fascinating world. A lot of our mocha, which is what we call Chinese matcha, mocha, are incredibly excited is to be part of this journey of reclaiming this lost art of matcha making. They wanted to be there. They wanted to provide feedback. For the 2 years that we've been carrying mocha, we have constantly provided feedback back to the producers. People think that they would love to have the color be more vibrant. People think that it's not fine enough, and how can we enhance that? And part of it is that there are a lot of misconceptions in matcha too. People believe that it has to be this almost neon green color to speak of its quality. That's not true. And part of it is also cultivar. If you use different cultivars, they're going to have different colors. They're going to have different chlorophyll content within these leaves. And these farmers, they made an intentional decision to use a local cultivar. They had an opportunity to import Japanese cultivars to grow on their farms so that they can cater to the masses in terms of their preference for the color. But they decided, if I'm really calling it reclaiming the lost art of matcha making, I should use a local cultivar. I should stay true to the origin. I should, be proud that I am doing this, even though it's difficult. Working against Japanese matcha, that's an incredibly difficult thing to do and mission to do. But they wanted to do it, and they wanted to do it right. And they decided to use Dragonwell, which is the most famous Chinese green tea varietal, to do it because it's signature. Like, when you're tasting our matcha, you can taste the Dragonwell. And that's what they wanted to do. And so, yeah, it will be less vibrant green than some of the Japanese cultivar by default, but that doesn't mean that the quality is poor. At some point, I also have to recognize that it's my fight, and it's the farmer's fight, and I can't expect everybody to be in the fight with me. But I would just say that I appreciate everyone who decided to join me in this journey, and who, one day, out of a whim, in a cafe that we serve, decided to be curious, decided to ask more questions on where the matcha is coming from and why it's there.
And the fact that the baristas are well equipped with the answers.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how popular white asparagus is. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's just different. There's no chlorophyll. It's just like it's not green,
Yeah.
And like.
And can you imagine people bashing on white asparagus, being like, "You're not green enough. That means that you are, for the peasants." Going back to the tariff discussion. But.
And is it true that you can use different teas for mocha? Can you use like white tea, red tea, black tea? Is that a thing, or does it always have to be tencha?
So mocha historically is green tea.
Yeah.
People have made, I think there are historical records of people using different production and getting it to be milled. But the entire process of it is green tea by default.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else to reflect on the tariff situation? I know you have a lot of stock just waiting, but riding this wave out, and you're just kind of taking it day by day, kind of observing the news, or is there anything else that you're preparing for?
So the only thing that we couldn't prepare for is the Japanese matcha shortage that I mentioned. So
that I did not know of.
We are going to be shipping out the 2025 mocha soon, and we'll see what that means. And that's just one product that I cannot not have here. So we're just going to see how the tariff actually works out in practice. I think one thing that I wanted to mention about tariffs, and I feel like everybody already felt, is that regardless of your political preference, ultimately these decisions just hurt individuals, right? They will hurt the corporations, and they would just offload all the cost to us.
Yeah.
And how to think about larger macroeconomic policies, or just in general diplomatic policies between countries. There are so many butterfly effects. There are so many repercussions that we don't know until we feel it.
Yeah.
But then again, that's putting perhaps too much responsibilities on each one of us when there is higher power that's making all the decisions. Perhaps what I'm trying to say is stay curious and think more. Think about everything that you are making a decision of. Be more intentional about it, and talk to people who don't agree with you. I think that's perhaps the most important thing that's for growth.
Yeah, what I don't get about Trump is the fact that he's very impulsive with these decisions, and he picks and chooses these tariffs for certain companies, and it's just it doesn't seem fair. Now,
well, it's never about fair.
Fairness. Yeah, it's but that being said, was China taking advantage of the U.S. as far as their import-export business?
Wow. We're going to that question.
I'm coming from a place of ignorance. I'm just curious.
Sure,
now.
Yeah. So I will give you my humble opinion. The U.S. government set a global standard on trade that started globalization, right? And it worked for United States back then, for a decade or two, and it no longer works for America. So I think saying if China is taking advantage of that situation is subjective, because you would only say you're taking advantage of me if I lost something, right? If I am at the inferior status than you. It worked for United States until it doesn't. And he is trying to set a completely brand new world order in terms of trade. So I don't know. It's true, and it's also meaningless to, I think, decide whether saying that is true or not.
Okay.
It's already happening. He already got the rest of the world to come to the negotiation table to renegotiate, and he's finally recognizing that he probably had the worst advisor on this U.S.-China trade war, because if anybody knows, even if you know a Chinese uncle, you will know that you cannot pressure him into doing what you want to do, because it's all about saving face. I don't know if you've heard of this.
Yeah.
It's all about giving them a step so that they can step down instead of forcing them head on to a solution.
How do you make them look good? Come on.
Exactly. Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur, he should know that. Come on.
Yeah.
Is there? And I know you've barrel aged your tea. Like, is there anything else that you're excited about as we move forward in 2025? On the other end of the spectrum of tariffs, like, is there anything that you are excited about?
I am excited about expanding the team. So in the coming days, we're actually gonna send out some communication seeking people who will be interested in working for us, so that we can actually expand the team and have more reach. So are these for tastings, or like what type of positions are you looking to fill? Sales.
Sales. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would love for somebody who can join me. They often say that there's no better storytellers than the owner itself.
Yeah.
Which is true. People tell me that I am so passionate about teas and stories. They can feel it.
At this point, you've probably come across some very passionate tea consumers, though, as well.
Yeah, definitely. Lots of tea heads out there. Yes. But I can only do so much.
Yeah.
And I only want to do so much because of all the different aspects of my life that I also want to prioritize. So I would love for this person to join me, so that we can continue telling our stories and sharing our mission of wanting to have humanity-centered teas to be shared to the wider public, whether through our online or through partnerships with coffee shops, bakeries, and restaurants.
Yeah. Annie, if I've offered this to previous guests, if you want to take over the pod, let me know.
Okay.
Like if
what format?
In any format, replace me with Justin. I've talked to Justin about takeovers as well. Replace me with Danielle from Monsoon Pottery. If you feel like there's like a certain dialogue that you feel like other people should hear, the platform is yours. It's just a podcast takeover, and I'm just in the background being a fly on the wall.
All right. Thank you. That's
really,
fascinating idea.
Anytime. But it was truly an honor and a pleasure to learn more about your story, about the stories that you're sharing, the work that Volition is doing. It's great work. I'm glad I found this in Whole Foods this last week, and I did 3 steeps, and I was like buzzing on the way here.
Great.
I was buzzing. So
yeah, that's another misconception about tea. People think that it's weak, but it doesn't have to be.
Where can people find you if they're not already following?
Yeah, so we're relatively active on social media, Volition Tea Co. You can find our teas on our website, volitiontea.com. If you're in Chicago, we are in almost all of the Chicago metropolitan Whole Foods stores. So find us there. Definitely support us there. Keep us on the shelves is very important. So that we can continue that education and prove to major retailers that there is a need for premium loose leaf tea and we deserve a spot on the shelves.
I mean, the one at Whole Foods looked depleted.
All right. You need to tell me which one.
Roosevelt and Canal.
Okay, understood.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Give Volition Tea and Annie a follow, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye.